There are moments in life that divide everything into before and after. Moments when you realize you'll never be the same person again. Not because something terrible happened to you, but because someone trusted you with something so heavy that by carrying it, you became different, bigger, more honest. I never thought I'd tell this story, but it grew inside me like a seed needing light. And I've learned over these past months that stories we keep quiet don't just disappear. They wait for the moment you're ready to look them straight in the eye. I'll start with the day Bruno came back. It was a Saturday afternoon, that kind of humid heat that glues your shirt to your back before you even step out of the house. The downtown square was decorated with yellow and green banners. That festive improvisation of a small town where everyone knows each other and no one needs a formal invitation. You simply show up because you're expected. That's how it works here. There's an economy of invitations in a small place. You show up, and that's enough. You don't show up, you better have a reason. And that day, everyone was waiting for Bruno. Sergeant Bruno Carnero, 32 years old. Broad shoulders, short hair like always, a small scar along his jawline that wasn't there when he left. A souvenir from the mission, as he'd later call it, without any detail. He arrived by car with his mother, Donna Sonia, who walked into that square like she was leading a parade. She wore that navy blue dress she saves for occasions like this. She was beaming. Bruno was present. That's what I noticed right from the start. The difference between beaming and being present. Everyone around him was radiating. Donna Sonia with her motherly pride, his childhood friends with the awe of seeing someone who left and came back, the city councilwoman who insisted on giving a short informal speech with a microphone borrowed from the bar. Bruno was there physically. Posture straight, a firm handshake, the kind of presence that fills a space. But his eyes were somewhere else. I'm 29 years old. I teach middle school in a small town. The same town where I was born, where I grew up, where I stayed while everyone else left. I've known Bruno since we were 15, and I've learned something in all these years teaching. There's a difference between who's here and who's really here. Kids taught me that. They haven't learned to fake it yet, so when they're somewhere else you notice. With adults it's subtler, but it's there. Bruno was playing a part. He was being what everyone needed. The local hero back from a UN mission in Central Africa, 6 months gone, home in one piece. But I saw things the others didn't. I saw when a car on the next street reversed with that dry sound of an old engine, and Bruno swallowed hard. His shoulders rose up half a centimeter for a second. He covered it right away, turned it into a posture shift, nothing that'd draw attention. If you weren't watching him specifically at that moment, you'd have missed it. But I was. I saw he was thinner than usual. Not sick looking, but the kind of thin that comes from weeks when your body wasn't a priority. Eating just something you do, not something you enjoy. I saw his phone on the bar table after we moved there. He kept it face down the whole time. Every so often he'd glance at it the way you look at a window when you know it's raining and there's nothing you can do about it. Not hope, just knowing. I saw how he answered questions about the mission. 2 sentences, 3 at most, then he'd shut it down with something broad. It was intense. We do what needs doing. It's different from the news. The kind of thing that sounds like an answer but isn't. It's a wall painted like a door. The party went on for 3 more hours. I stayed because that's what you do, because everyone expected Bruno's friends to be there. But I also couldn't stop watching him. Something was off and I couldn't place it. The way it bothers you when you leave the house feeling like you forgot something but can't remember what. You get on with your day, but part of you stays behind searching. Late in the night, people were breaking off into smaller groups. Bruno was across the square with 2 childhood friends who'd never left the county. I was near the exit, about to go. Then he looked at me. Not a casual glance. It was the look of someone searching for a specific person in a crowd and finally finding them. He crossed the space between us with this calm that didn't match what his eyes were saying. He got close enough so we could talk privately. "I need to talk to you," he said. "Not here." And then he went back to the others as if nothing had happened. I went home with that phrase stuck in my chest. "I need to tell you. Not here." I knew Bruno well enough to know he didn't say that lightly. He doesn't waste words, never has. When Bruno speaks, he's decided to. And the fact that he said not here, not later, not whenever, meant something about this place was the problem. The space, the people, the moment, all of it. I lay in bed that night with the windows open because the heat wouldn't quit, staring at the ceiling thinking about what I'd noticed. That flinch, the phone face down, the shutdown answers, that look, I didn't sleep well that night. Let me tell you who Bruno was before the uniform. Because small towns do something to the men who grow up in them, and I needed to understand that before I could understand what came later. They teach you who you're supposed to be before you figure out who you are, and they do it so smoothly, so consistently, that by the time you realize what's happened, you're already 30 and the mold's hardened. It's not mean. It's just what love looks like when it doesn't know how else to say it. Bruno's dad owned a tire shop, the quiet type who mistakes silence for strength. He wanted Bruno in the army before Bruno even knew how to write. It wasn't cruel, it was the only road he knew. A real man's disciplined, a real man serves, a real man doesn't need much: land, work, family, respect. Bruno got this as fact, not opinion. The problem was that Bruno, deep down, was something else. I knew it the first week we became friends at 15. He was reading a poetry book, hidden inside a history book, when I sat next to him in the cafeteria. He closed it fast, but not fast enough. I said nothing. He looked at me, waiting for a reaction. Nothing. After 2 minutes of awkward silence, he opened the poetry book again, slowly, like testing the waters, like an animal coming out of its burrow an inch at a time. That's how it started. We were an unlikely pair that made perfect sense underneath. I was the books guy, the glasses, the quiet voice, heading where everyone expected me to. Teacher like my mom, and that's exactly what happened with no drama. I didn't have to fight expectations because I was already going that way. Bruno was different. The tire shop owner's kid who'd go into the army because that's what you did. But he spent his afternoons trying to figure out why some words in a certain order could make you feel things with no name. He hid this part of himself carefully in contexts where it wasn't welcome, which was most contexts. But with me, for some reason that neither of us named at the time, he didn't hide it. Or he hid it less. We talked in a way I've never heard him talk to anyone else. Not about big things necessarily. Movies sometimes, people in town, things we didn't even know we were trying to figure out. There was something different about those conversations. No performing. I didn't need to be more outgoing or more of a guy than I was, and he didn't need to be harder or more sure than he felt. We could just be who we were in the space our friendship made between us. When he went to the army at 18, we lost touch for a while, like you do, and then reconnected. The friendship survived the distance the way real friendships do. Not constant contact, but depth when you see each other again. Every 2 or 3 years, he'd come back visiting his mom. We'd meet at a coffee shop or someone's porch, and it was like time hadn't worked the way it usually does when you haven't seen someone in years. Bruno became a sergeant. Routine missions, training, the normal path for a competent military guy. He was good at what he did, no question about that. He learned to be what the army needed, the same way he'd learned to be what the town needed, the same way his father taught him. He was disciplined at becoming whatever the moment required. But there was this question I never put into words back then, that I can name now. What was left of Bruno when the moment was over? But there's something Bruno said one night, years back. We'd stayed up until dawn talking on his mom's porch while the town slept. We'd covered different things. The mission he was about to take, an ex of mine, politics, a band we liked in school. Then Bruno leaned back in his chair, eyes lost in the street's darkness, and said, no build-up, like he'd been thinking it for years. You're the only person I don't have to pretend with. I didn't answer. I just understood, and I kept it. That sentence stayed with me for years the way some sentences do. Not up front, but there. Like a word you learn in a foreign language and suddenly hear in a new place and understand in a way the definition doesn't cover. You're the only person I don't need to pretend with. What was he pretending? To who? How long? I didn't ask that night, but when he looked at me in that square and said, I need to tell you something, not here. That old phrase came back, and I knew what was coming. 3 days after we met in the square, there was a knock on my door past 11 at night. I was awake, grading 4th grade essays about what you want to be when you grow up. The kind that gets to me because kids don't know yet that what they want to be and what the world wants them to be aren't always the same. When I heard the knock. Not urgent, but deliberate. The knock that says, I know it's late, but I came anyway. I opened the door and it was Bruno. He wore jeans and a t-shirt, no military bearing, or he had it, but something was different. Loosened up, like when a structure's carried something heavy for a long time and starts giving way. Not all at once, but out of tiredness. He'd been drinking, I noticed. Not a lot, but enough that his eyes weren't as controlled as usual. Can I come in? He asked. I let him in. He went straight to the kitchen. He's known my house since we were in our 20s. and sat in his usual chair on the right side of the table. I sat across from him. I put water on to boil because I needed to do something with my hands, because when you know something important is about to happen, your body needs to move. He didn't say anything for a while, just stared at the table, fingers intertwined, those big hands completely still. The kettle whistled. I made the coffee quietly and put a cup in front of him without asking. He didn't touch it. What was the mission really like? I asked. He breathed out through his nose, not quite a laugh. Hot, he said. Dust. Waiting. More waiting. Then tension out of nowhere and more waiting. He paused. That's what people want to hear. I'm not people. He looked at me. His jaw clenched and let go once. Then he started talking. The camp conditions, the bureaucracy, the heat that wasn't like here, heat that doesn't cool down at night, follows you into sleep and makes resting a fight with your own body. The tense moments and the long stretches of nothing where your mind starts doing what training tells it not to. That specific loneliness of being surrounded by people all the time without being able to tell most of them what you're really thinking. He spoke slow, testing each sentence before he let it out, like someone on background tapping to check if it'll hold before putting his weight on it. Then he mentioned a name. There was this guy in the unit, a healthcare worker with a medical NGO partnered with the mission, Mateus. The way he said that name was different from everything else. That syllable had weight. Mateus. The way you say the name of a city where you lived a whole lifetime in 2 years, with that density of experience time can't measure. Mateus Alencar, he continued, 28 years old, from Recife. Field doctor, he stayed with us for safety protocol. A pause. He was... Another pause. Longer this time. He had a way of seeing things that I had never encountered before. Calm. Curious. Not the kind of curious that keeps asking questions. The kind that watches, pays attention. We would talk during the dead hours, when there was nothing to do. Sometimes even into the early hours of the morning, when everyone else had gone to sleep. I listened. I didn't interrupt. A conversation about northeastern Brazilian music in a makeshift tent while outside something exploded 3 kilometers away but wasn't an immediate threat. A time the two of them had stayed awake watching a distant storm as if it were a show, barely speaking, just watching. The fragments people keep when something matters more than they expected it to matter. We got together, he finally said, direct, like ripping off a band-aid, quickly because slower would be worse, and any intermediate speed is just more suffering without a conclusion. For months, the pockets of time we could find. He didn't elaborate on the logistics. He didn't need to. I had never felt anything like it. Not confusion, no, it wasn't confusion. It was a clarity that scared me because it was too clear. You know when you finally understand something you've been avoiding understanding, and you realize you were avoiding it precisely because you knew it would change everything? I knew. And then in the final weeks of the mission, he paused. His hands, which had been resting still on the table, clenched into fists in a quick spasm and opened again. That involuntary movement of someone holding on to something that cannot be held. An ambush on the way back from an outpost. The convoy was hit. Mateus was in the second vehicle. The silence that followed lasted longer than any other pause. I held his hand, he said. His voice sounded different, smaller, harsher, as if it were coming from a place he normally kept shut and locked. But that was now wide open and the outside air stung. I couldn't make a sound, I couldn't. The others were around, I couldn't. I didn't say anything. Sometimes silence is the only respect possible. It's the only space that can hold what cannot be said. When he continued, his voice had returned to something closer to controlled, but not entirely. There was a lingering crack in it, one that control couldn't completely seal. I came back here and no one can know what I'm carrying, because no one here has the language for it. My mother, the army, the town. He raised his eyes to me for the first time in several minutes. Can you keep this for me? It wasn't a casual question. It was a man holding out the most fragile part of himself to someone else, knowing it was fragile, yet choosing to do it anyway. There was a level of trust in that act, a level of faith that I wouldn't drop what was being placed in my hands that struck me in a way I still carry. Not as a burden, as a responsibility I chose. I can't, I said. He breathed, a long exhale, like someone dropping a weight they had been holding for a long time. finally finding a place to set it down for a moment. But then, as he was getting ready to leave, he said something that hung suspended between us like an unfinished lyric in a song. "There's one thing I haven't told you yet about why I chose you." He looked at me as if he were going to continue, and then he didn't. He changed the subject, stood up, and said it was getting late. I didn't press him. That incomplete sentence left my house with him, but it stayed with me. The following days were strange in a way that's hard to describe to anyone who has never carried someone else's secret. I had agreed to keep a secret, and suddenly I realized what that meant in practice. It's not just holding information inside you, it's continuing to live normally while carrying something that changes the texture of everything around you. It's looking at people and knowing that the world they are seeing has one less dimension. It's being in a conversation about everyday things and feeling the weight of something that can't enter the conversation but is right there, present, like a room in your house that you keep locked but whose existence you never forget. I kept teaching. I graded essays, taught the multiplication tables, mediated playground conflicts. Children's lives have this power to pull you into the present because they exist entirely in the present. They don't worry about what happened yesterday or what will happen tomorrow with the same intensity as adults. Those hours inside the classroom were the cleanest ones I had. After school, it was harder. I went to Mass on Sunday because in small towns, your presence or absence is noticed and talked about. I had coffee with the chatty neighbor. I did everything I always did, but there was an added layer of awareness to everything. A dual consciousness of living the visible surface of life while something else entirely was happening underneath. I saw Bruno at Mass with Donna Sonia, and something shifted in how I viewed the scene. Donna Sonia is a resilient woman, the kind the Brazilian countryside produces in spades. She worked as a seamstress for 30 years, raised her son practically alone after her husband fell ill and could no longer support the family, and still keeps an impeccable home and an active presence in the community today. She's one of those people the town recognizes as a pillar, the kind who shows up at wakes, weddings, and rosary prayers, always with the same care. She loves Bruno with the intensity of someone who has made it the central mission of her life. That morning, she was next to him in the front pew of the church, her hand occasionally touching his arm in that maternal, protective way. She didn't know she was touching a man harboring a pain she didn't have the language to receive. And Bruno was right there, sitting up straight, singing the hymns he knew by heart since childhood, being the son she needed him to be. After Mass, outside, while people were greeting each other, this little small-town ritual that can last 45 minutes without anyone thinking it's taking too long, I watched Bruno talk to the priest, to his mother's friends, to a cousin who showed up by surprise. He was brilliant at it. The smile in the right place, the perfectly calibrated joke, the kind of presence people love to have around because it radiates a certain safety. I knew what lay beneath that. There was a brief moment, less than a second, when our eyes met over the crowd in the church square. And for that fraction of a second, his smile didn't change, but his eyes did. A profound exhaustion appeared in them, like a window accidentally swinging open and shutting right back, fast enough that no one else would notice. After Mass, we met up for about 20 minutes at Sebastian's bar for a quick coffee. It was the first time we had been alone since the night of his confession. When the others who were at the same table left to pay, Bruno was holding his cup with both hands, staring into his coffee as if it held the answers. "I'm fine," he said before I could ask anything. I didn't ask. He almost smiled. "But you were going to." I wasn't. I was going to wait for him to say it, but I didn't correct him. He had that look of someone who slept, woke up, functioned all day, and yet is exhausted in a way that sleep can't fix. I had seen this kind of tiredness before. In students carrying something heavy at home, in parents who show up to meetings physically present but with their minds elsewhere. It's the exhaustion of someone who spends constant energy keeping up a version of themselves, not just existing, but actively performing for the people around them. It's different from normal tiredness. This exhaustion doesn't go away with rest. It only goes away when you can, for just a moment, stop building. In those days, I began to understand what it means to carry someone's secret. It's not neutral. It starts to inhabit you. You think differently. You observe differently. Every conversation gains an extra layer of awareness. What is being said, what isn't, what cannot be said. You become a kind of guardian. But a guardian isn't passive. It's an active role that takes up space. I felt at the same time closer to Bruno than ever, because he had given me something he hadn't given anyone else, and more alone than I needed to be because there was no one I could talk to about what I was carrying. The secret creates this paradox. It brings you closer to the person who trusted you and pushes you away from everyone else. That was the cost, and I had agreed to it. But there was one thing I still hadn't understood. About the secret, about Bruno, about myself. And it was about to become impossible to ignore. The town started to notice. That's what small towns do, they notice. Not necessarily with malicious intent, but with a social vigilance that comes from decades of living together, where everyone's every move is available data for collective analysis. When you grow up in a place where everyone knows you, your life is to some extent public property. The neighbor knows your routine better than you do. The grocery store owner knows what you eat. The priest knows when you miss mass. That's just how it works. No one decided it would be this way. It simply is. Just like things that have been around for so long, they become part of the scenery. Bruno was 32, back after a successful mission, single, and there were no women on the horizon. Donna Sonia was the first to make comments. Subtle ones, the way mothers know how to make, not accusations, not direct questions, but those statements that are actually questions disguised as observations. Fernanda got divorced, you know. Did you go see the guys play soccer? Claudia was asking about you. A man your age needs a home, Bruno. It doesn't look good staying at your mother's house forever. Every sentence carrying the same weight, unspoken but completely clear. Bruno would listen and deflect, always with an answer that closed the subject without shutting the door completely, because shutting the door completely would cause more scrutiny than leaving it ajar. It was a constant navigation, this balance of giving enough not to cause alarm without giving enough to be truthful. But there was one night at Sebastio's bar that was different. I was there when it happened. Renato Salave, a guy who had served in the same barracks as Bruno years ago, before leaving the army and coming back to town to work on his father's farm, made a joke. One of those jokes that everyone laughs at without thinking because it's the kind of thing you say that's always been said that you say just because that's how it is. A joke about Bruno being back for over a month and still not having hooked up with anyone, using the kind of language men use among themselves in this context, expecting everyone to understand and laugh along because it's just a joke. It wasn't intentionally cruel. It was thoughtless. There is a difference, but in practical terms, sometimes it doesn't change much. Bruno turned to face him. What happened wasn't a fight. Bruno didn't hit anyone, didn't break anything. But there was a moment, about 3 seconds that felt like much longer, where the entire bar went silent and Renato looked at Bruno and clearly understood he had touched on something he shouldn't have. Bruno said something quietly without raising his voice, the kind of thing you can't repeat exactly, but that clearly serves as a final warning, the kind that doesn't need to be repeated. Renato looked away. Someone changed the subject. The bar slowly went back to normal, like a liquid settling back to its level after a stone is thrown in. But I saw Bruno's hand holding his glass. His knuckles were white. I found him outside about 10 minutes later. He leaned against the bar's side wall, staring down the empty street, controlled but his shoulders too high. "You didn't have to do that," I said. "I know. It'll draw attention." "I know." He breathed out slow, tension still in his shoulders. "But sometimes the other option's worse." I got it. What I was seeing, Bruno standing taller, more physical, quicker, wasn't aggression. It was panic in a tougher suit. A guy overcompensating because he knew he was in dangerous territory, and the only language that place understood was strength, quick reaction, not taking anything. If he didn't react, people'd notice. So he reacted, more than needed, more than healthy, because too much gets written off as temper, but not enough gets written off as nothing the town wants to hear. A few days after that, Bruno was in my kitchen and left his phone on the table to go to the bathroom. The screen was locked, but when he came back, he picked it up, unlocked it to check something, and for a second, 1 second, I saw it. A photo. A man. Young, smiling at someone out of frame, somewhere with light different from here. A soft yellowish light. Warm but not our countryside heat. Dark skin, short hair, eyes that even in a photo seem focused on something beyond the camera. That presence some people have. Bruno locked the screen fast and put it away. The kitchen silence got heavy. I didn't ask, but I kept the image. That smiling guy, Mateus, who I'd never seen but now had a face. A real face, not just a name in the dark. And carrying someone's secret changes when you can picture the face at the center of it. And the sentence Bruno hadn't finished, about why I chose you, came back to me that night as I tried to sleep, without me yet knowing what it was trying to tell me. Let me talk about what happened inside me on those nights. Carl Jung said the hardest part of becoming yourself, individuation, is facing the shadow. The shadow isn't evil, it's the unknown. The parts of you you've never looked at straight on, not cowardice exactly, but a protection you developed so early you forgot you chose it. Over time, not looking at certain parts becomes natural. You stop knowing you're avoiding. You think that's just who you are. I learned about Jung in college and used it in class when teaching teenagers basic psychology. An intellectual tool, an interesting concept with teaching applications. I didn't know he was describing something about me. But in the weeks after Bruno's confession, something happened I can only call a realization. Alone at night, I started looking at memories differently. Memories with Bruno, specific ones. That night we stayed up until dawn in our early 20s. What made that night different from others? The way he'd say my name looking for me in a crowd, different from how he said other names. And I always knew that without asking why. A dinner years ago where neither of us spoke for a long time and neither of us broke the silence. And it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that only happens between people who trust each other deeply. I'd filed those away as that's just us. Deep friendship. Uncommon male friendship, but not impossible. I'd convinced myself, so easily I'll say because it was simpler than the alternative, that what I felt was just that. Only that. Nothing more. But when Bruno told me about Mateus, when I saw what he looked like talking about a man he'd loved in a way he had no words for, something shifted in how those old memories lit up, like they'd been waiting for a specific light to show what was always there. It wasn't dramatic. Not the movie kind where the music swells and you stare at rain and everything clicks. Quieter. Like your eyes adjusting to dark. Gradually you see things that were always there but normal light made invisible. You don't get new vision. You adjust what was already there. I had feelings for Bruno I'd never named because I never needed to. The name was inconvenient. The name belonged to a universe I, as a public school teacher in a small country town, had chosen. No drama, barely aware. Like a door you walk through and close without thinking. Not to live in. It was easier being the loyal friend, the quiet guy, glasses and books, calm life, no waves. The shadow isn't what you hide from others. It's what you hide from yourself. The difference matters. What you hide from others still exists inside you. You can access it, visit it alone, you know it's there. What you hide from yourself is different. You build a wall so solid you don't know what's on the other side. Then someone pulls a brick out. Not intentionally, not for you. And the light bleeding in is disorienting. Not pain. Like waking up in a room you didn't know existed in your own house. I didn't do anything with that realization. Didn't call Bruno at 3 in the morning with a declaration. Didn't write it down. Didn't plan anything. Didn't make decisions. I sat with it in the nights that came. In the kitchen with coffee getting cold. On the porch watching the quiet street where sometimes a car or dog passed but mostly nothing. And I let it be real without turning it into action right away. Sometimes just acknowledging is the first step, not what comes after. But there was a question now inside me with Bruno's secret. If I was finally looking at myself straight, what else wasn't I seeing? I didn't get much time to sit with that peacefully. The outside world has its rhythm, and it doesn't wait for you to figure yourself out before the next thing hits. Ribeiro showed up on a Wednesday. I didn't know who he was when he approached me in front of school as I left afternoon classes with papers under my arm. 45. Unmistakable military bearing even in a civilian suit. Training does something to how you carry yourself that clothes can't hide. The posture, the efficiency, how you stand without being stiff. He said my name before I realized I didn't know him, and that stopped me cold. I'm Ribeiro, he said. I met Bruno on deployment. Battalion officer. A calibrated pause, the kind so quick it doesn't seem calculated, but it is. I'm passing through for work. I heard you two grew up together. I wanted to grab coffee, chat, see how he's settling in. The conversation that followed was closest to an interrogation I've been through, dressed up like a casual chat between a concerned adult and a friend of a subordinate. Two levels happening, what was said and what was being evaluated. And Ribeiro was good at both. He asked about Bruno's mental state. Those exact words, mental state, with technical neutrality that turns a nosy question into standard protocol. Asked if Bruno seemed like himself. Sleeping okay, socializing or isolating. Mentioned the deployment or avoiding it. I answered with the most positive version of truth. Bruno was fine, home, resting. Readjustment takes time after deployment, nothing concerning. Going out, seeing people. Every sentence was technically true but misleading, and I discovered right there in that coffee shop with a trained guy asking calibrated questions that I could do exactly that. Lie without lying, protect without seeming like I was protecting him. I wasn't proud, but I didn't regret it either. Ribeiro listened with trained attention, not natural, processing not just what I said but how. The slight pauses, my word choices, what I left out. I knew he knew I was being careful, and he knew I knew he knew. A polite house of mirrors, neither of us acknowledging we were playing a game. When he got up to leave, standing outside the cafe on the sidewalk, he paused. Sometimes, he said, a man brings back things from war that don't fit his old life. Shame when he hides instead of adapting. I didn't answer. He didn't wait. He turned and walked away with that measured stride of someone never in a hurry because they control the time. I went home with that sentence following me like a shadow. That night, Bruno showed up at my door. Earlier than before, 8 o'clock and sober. Tense differently than his confession visit. That was tension about to open up. This was tension locking everything down. Ribeiro was here, he said. It wasn't a question. He was. I talked to him. What did you say? That you're doing fine. He stared at me, assessing. Military guys assess different from regular people. Comprehensive, analyzing on multiple layers at once. You shouldn't have said anything, as he said. Harsh in a way I wasn't used to from him. Ribeiro would have thought it weirder if I was indifferent. A childhood friend with nothing to say about his buddy coming home looks way more suspicious than one stating the obvious. Forget what I told you, he said. Direct, dry, final. Pretend it never happened. All of it. Silence. Then, for the first time since Bruno came back, I didn't back down. No, I said. He frowned, surprised, not angry, not what he expected from me. I can't forget it, I continued. And I wouldn't want to even if I could. Not because I'm good at keeping secrets, because what you told me matters. He mattered. What you felt matters. You can't ask me to treat the only real thing in your last few months like it's nothing. You don't get how this works. No, but I saw what happened on your face when you said his name. I paused. Let that sit. You thought you could bury this. You won't. Not weakness, because what you felt was too real to bury like trash. Most honest conversation we'd ever had. Not smooth, tense silences. A moment where Bruno stood up and I thought he'd walk out and I couldn't stop him, but he didn't leave. He stayed. When he spoke again, his voice lost that artificial hardness, that armor he puts on when he needs to be impenetrable. I don't know how to do this, he said. Simple, true, nothing else. I know what I said, but you don't need to right now. He stayed longer. We didn't resolve anything that night. Nothing to resolve immediately in a concrete way. But we got back to where conversation was possible, where there was honesty instead of performing. Sometimes that's enough for a next step. Sometimes the next step isn't fixing things. It's just not running away. The annual Veterans Commemoration happens every August in town. The city council sets up a simple setup in the square. A low stage, rows of chairs, the municipal band that plays 3 songs then sits for decoration while the authorities talk. Small event in a small town, but carries symbolic weight. Honor, sacrifice, community-approved masculinity. The men who served are publicly recognized, and that matters to them and their families in a way bigger city people don't always get. For Bruno, recently back from an international UN mission, he was inevitable as the center. Exactly what the town needed. I went because there was no good reason not to, and in small towns, absence is information. I got there early enough for a side spot. Not front, but I could see the stage. Donna Sonia was in the front row, next to the councilman who organized it. She wore the same navy dress from the welcome party, like she'd been saving it for occasions with her son being publicly recognized. There as the mother of a hero, playing that role seriously. Bruno stood beside the stage with the other local veterans, mostly older guys from other missions, other times. That calm of people who've done this ceremony many times. He wore uniform, first time since coming back. The uniform did something to him. Didn't transform him, but activated aversion. Shoulders further back, chin higher. That economy of movement training leaves in your muscles as permanent memory. Ribeiro was in the audience. I saw him before Bruno saw me. Opposite side of the square. a spot where he could see everything without being noticed. I got it right away. His being here was neither accident nor courtesy. The event followed protocol. The anthem, the councilwoman's speech, tributes to all the veterans, names read out loud one by one, each standing briefly. Then the mic went to Bruno. The son who makes us proud, as the councilwoman put it, that affectionate formula summing up everything the town wanted him to be. Bruno walked up the 2-stage steps with military elegance and took the microphone. He started to speak. The first sentences were perfect, thanking the town, his family, the army, the mission as a privilege, gratitude for the warm welcome. A man who'd spent years knowing exactly what to say in public, a whole life-building fluency in that language, calibrated, honorable, exactly what people expected and more. Then he stopped. Not an oratorical pause, those calculated pauses speakers use for weight, letting words settle. Something different. A pause when your script stops working and you're alone with silence, not knowing how to leave it. From my spot, I saw what no one else did. Bruno's hands on the microphone stand. He'd pressed them against the podium, not gripping, leaning, like someone who needs to touch something solid to know they're still standing, and shaking. Not much. The kind of tremor you don't see unless you're watching for it. But I was. For months I'd been watching Bruno with attention no one else had. He was losing it. The silence lasted 3-4 seconds. Most people don't notice because at public events your mind fills in pauses, completes the sentence you think's coming. But Dona Sonia tilted her head in the front row. Mothers do that when something's wrong with their kid before they can name it. And Ribeiro, opposite side, got quieter in a way I noticed because I was watching him too. I moved. Not heroic, not calculated. I moved, crossed 2 or 3 meters to a more central spot, more visible from the stage, until he'd see me if he looked left. That was it. Nothing more. And he looked. Don't know why that exact moment. Instinct, maybe. The thing that makes you turn to the window when someone's coming before you hear them. Some sense before thinking that tells you where to be. He looked to the left and found me. Our eyes locked. I kept my expression blank. No encouraging smile, no gesture, no nod. Just stood there, visible, present. A fixed point he could use to orient when everything else was spinning. He turned back to the mic and finished the speech. Not what he started. Something shorter, direct, stripped of the formal stuff from the beginning. What it means carrying an experience that doesn't fit simple words. What you learn when you're far from everything familiar long enough to understand what familiar means. Gratitude, not ceremony gratitude, but gratitude for making it back, for this moment, this square, these people. No one in the audience knew what happened in those 15 seconds. To them, a more personal speech than expected. Maybe shorter than a sergeant back from an international mission would give, but fine, real applause. Dona Sonia was moved, hand on her heart, the way she gets when Bruno surprises her. After, people mingled and drank soda at the table next to the stage. I watched from far as Ribeiro approached Bruno. About 8 minutes. Couldn't hear from where I stood. Just body language. Ribeiro used that professional restraint, measured movements, expressions in a narrow range. Bruno listened more, posture stiffer than in private, answering enough to not seem defiant. It ended. Ribeiro left without anyone else. Crossed the square with that walk I knew and disappeared before goodbyes. Bruno stood still where they talked, staring where Ribeiro went. Then he turned and walked through the square, greeting people who came up, looking like he was searching for something. Took a few minutes to find me. What did he say? I asked when we were alone for a moment near the exit of the square. Bruno rubbed the back of his neck, organizing his words before letting them out. The mission generated reports, he said. There's a post-mission mental health protocol activated in my case. Standard, nothing to worry about as long as I'm fine and showing social integration. And if anything needs in my file, I should log it myself rather than waiting for someone else. A pause. He said it calmly. We stood quiet as people walked past. Does he know? I asked. Suspects, nothing concrete. Bruno looked at me. Thanks to you. I didn't answer. No need to. What happened next doesn't follow the shape stories usually have at the end. Bruno didn't make an announcement. Didn't confront Dona Sonia with truth about who he is. Didn't request discharge from the army. Didn't leave town. None of the resolution thing stories like this sometimes need to feel like they've ended, to make you feel you've arrived somewhere different. What happened was quieter, and quieter means more real. Real resolutions almost never feel like resolutions when they're happening. Just feel like continuation. One day after another, small differences that only show up when you look back. Bruno started coming to my kitchen with no reason. Not always with something to talk about. Not always urgent. Sometimes just coffee. Sometimes sitting quiet in a house that wanted nothing but his presence. The only place where he didn't have to build an acceptable version of himself for someone else. Sometimes he brought a book. Sometimes he just stared out the window for 20 minutes without talking, then got up and said he had to go. Gradually, in the weeks after, he talked about Matthias differently. Not like an urgent confession of something swallowing him, ready to explode, but as a memory. Like someone learning you can remember without being destroyed by remembering. That memory can coexist with your present life without erasing either. One afternoon, he described a conversation with Matthias about field medicine in conflict zones. Matthias' theory on who emotionally survives that work and who doesn't. He laughed at one part, corrected something he misremembered, got precise about a joke Matthias made. First time I'd heard Bruno talk about Matthias like this. Not grief, but a living memory. Matthias as a person who existed and left something permanent. Not just absence. Grief didn't disappear. Doesn't just vanish like mist in sun. But difference between early Bruno, sinking in silence while performing heroism for the town, and the guy who could sit in my kitchen and say Matthias would have hated this seasoning when I messed up garlic, between holding it in and integrating it, between hiding pain and carrying loss. I stopped pretending too. Not for Bruno, not yet, or not completely, or maybe not in the way that's possible one day, but for myself. I let things I'd avoided naming occupy space inside instead of edges of consciousness. I knew they were there but didn't face them, didn't need to act on them for them to be real. Sometimes acknowledging is enough as a first step. Sometimes the first step is huge. One night near the end of those weeks, Bruno said something that stuck. You asked what I didn't finish, about why I chose you. I remembered. The incomplete sentence from confession night, hanging between us for weeks like a note still vibrating. I chose you, he said, because you're the only person who looks at me without wanting me different. Not today, always since 15. I think I knew that before I knew what I needed you to keep. You were the only place I could be who I was without it costing me. I stayed quiet. Is that all? I asked, not disappointed, genuinely curious what that meant and what else might be beyond it. He looked at me, held eye contact in a heavy pause, much longer than a normal moment. For now, he said. Something in that answer, choosing for now instead of yes, words that imply an after, even if that after doesn't know its shape yet, stayed with me like a window left cracked open, not promising anything, but not closing either. So what? What happened? Where are things now? I'll be honest. Some things are still unfolding. No ending ready because it hasn't happened. And I've learned that waiting for an ending to tell a story is never telling it. Stories that matter are always unfolding as you tell them. What I have is what's real instead of fabricated. A process. Small changes you only notice looking back, seeing how far you moved without realizing you were walking. You think you were still, then realize the distance. Bruno still lives at his mom's. Donna Sonia still makes her relationship comments. Genuine love, not knowing the cost to her son, maybe she never will. Maybe that's how it needs to be for now. The army has protocols, and Bruno navigates them with competence he's built over a career. The town's still the town. Curious, affectionate, demanding, opinionated about itself. But there's one afternoon a week, sometimes more, when there's coffee on my table for Bruno when he shows up. And there's a 32-year-old man slowly learning it's possible to exist without every part needing approval to live. Not everything has to be visible to be real. The invisible can be honored anyway. And there's me, learning. And this learning doesn't end. That carrying someone's secret is a gift as heavy as any gift. I was chosen not in spite of who I am, but because of it. And the parts of myself I kept silent for so long also deserve the space I helped create for Bruno. Jung spoke about the shadow not as enemy, but as part of us waiting to be acknowledged, not integrated with fanfare, not exposed with drama, just seen, acknowledged. Welcome to the table in a way it never was. Individuation doesn't happen in a moment. It happens slow, non-linear, invisible from inside. Only readable when you see where you were 6 months ago and realize you're not there anymore. Maybe that's what Bruno's secret did. It taught me that guarding someone's truth with care is learning to guard your own with care. That love at whatever form, whatever language, even languages without words yet where you live, doesn't diminish in silence, but doesn't need to stay silent forever either. Things I haven't said yet. Between me and Bruno, between me and myself. Things that might be said someday. Or maybe take another shape that isn't saying, lived instead of declared. Neither scares me like before. Fear of the unsaid shrinks when you stop pretending it doesn't exist. I know I'm no longer hiding from myself. Bruno's not hiding either, not completely, not anymore, not in the place that really matters, inside. And sometimes this silent step toward your truth, this small movement no one sees but changes everything inside, is enough to begin. Not finish, just begin. If you carry something without a name, part of you kept quiet so long it feels like it doesn't exist, maybe it's time to look at it. Not rushed, not judging, just with patience you'd give someone you love. You deserve the same. If this story hit you, if you saw yourself in these silences, in unsaid things, if you felt seen in something you thought you carried alone, leave a comment. Don't explain what you felt. Don't name anything not ready. Just knowing you were here, stay to the end, let this in. That's enough. Thank you for listening.